Ready for it.
Thrilled for it.
Presenting Franks with Turbo Booster Jet Engine.
Nexa.
Well, we were all ready to resume talking cricket, and we were hoping that the next time we come live, now that the league has resumed, and we're looking forward for a finish to what was a great league phase of the IPL before the tournament had to be suspended. Understandably, we hope all our viewers are in the best of physical and mental health with tough times that have preceded this. And we were looking forward to RCB, KKR after Virat Kohli's high-profile test retirement and all that. But rain has played spoil sport to our plans. On Nexa presents ESPN Cricket Info Timeout. Unfortunately, it's an anticlimax, but it still has significant consequences. The defending champions are officially out of the race to the playoffs, and RCB still have some work to do. They inch closer to a top four, but I'm sure they're eyeing more than that. Tom Moody is back though. Piyush Chawla is with him, reunited after your days in the Punjab dugout back in the early days of the IPL. Many years ago, is that right, Piyush?
First 3 years, but I still call him the coach.
You still call him the coach. And what do you still call Piyush, Tom?
Just PC. He's always been PC.
That I call Dustin DS.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
Mostly you call me Matt Roller's replacement.
I promised him that I will not bring up Matt's name. When I asked him, Dustin, you'll need to fill in now as a strong Indian replacement for our overseas talent who is now no longer available with us since he had a single entry visa. Make sure he fills his paperwork out. But you mentioned it, not me. Right. Welcome to all our viewers again. We're going to have a quick chat. If you have something that you want to throw to the panel, please feel free. We'll cover just the significance of this result or this no result as it turns out for KKR in particular, and a confirmation on the points table that the defending champions, a lot of whom who played for that winning side, were still in this team, even though it had a new captain in Ajinkya Rahane and a new coach, or rather a new mentor in the absence of Gautam Gambhir with Dwayne Bravo there. But they find themselves out of it now with just one to play. And that will be, ironically, the last year's final where SRH will join them in what's now just a game for pride. Bengaluru are top, perhaps only for a little while. Punjab are in action tomorrow, as are Gujarat Titans. So let's just start with the KKR story and the side of things. And they still had, a lot to do with the resumption, Tom, but it's a fair enough reflection of how their season has been, and yet disappointing, given that's still a good team and they're out of the competition.
Yeah, it is a good team, isn't it? But, you know, you take your captain away from that team from last year. You know, he's got, you know, a good touch as a captain. He just seems to be very sound tactically. You see, you know, how he operates on the field. He's also very calm out in the middle, I think, which is a real positive also in the IPL environment, is to have that sort of calm head when you've got everything else that's happening around you at a million miles an hour. It's really important to have that leadership like that. But it just appeared that, you know, there was a number of last-minute decisions that really shaped their season. You know, whether it was the overpaid price they paid for Iyer to get him back into their squad, or whether it was suddenly the last-minute bid on Rahane that then suddenly gets positioned as the captain. I'm sure at the beginning of the auction, on day one of the auction, that was not part of their philosophy at all. But at end of day two, suddenly they've got a significant high-profile Indian player and great player playing a role that they hadn't even discussed.
You've won the title with this team. We know that they are known to be sharp tactically, and even after those mistakes that we can, if we call them that, of getting Venkaya for a high price, that team still looks strong. It had deep batting, which other teams don't. It had all-rounders, which other teams don't. What do you sense was their biggest issue this season?
I think that tactically they missed few points, because few of the games which were actually looked like at one point of time that was in their hand. When you remember that one game when Rinku Singh and Andre Russell was on the bench, they sent Angresh,
LSG,
Raghuvanshi, and then after that they made another change. They sent, I think, Ramandeep, and they was
Punjab game, they didn't chase 115.
Yeah.
Exactly. So those few games, because it's very important to win those kind of games, because at the end of the day, it's a matter of 1 or 2 win here and there. Because suppose if they would have won those 2 games, they would have been sitting pretty at the 16 points. And then when the game washes out, so that 1 point works as good as a win. So that really missed for them. And the opening partnership, because last year they were heavily dependent. They were doing a lot of work for them.
Well, Phil Salt
Phil Salt
was
yes.
a big player.
So
And obviously,
Phil's-
Narayan had a brilliant season as well.
Phil Salt, Sunil Narayan, they were giving them brilliant start. And when you set the base so strong, so the batting which has to follow, things becomes really easy for them. So that's how they.
Well, one of the other interesting points is that with Rahane in the side, what it meant that they had a lot of players of similar style.
Yeah.
You know, Rahane, Raghavanshi, Pandey.
Even Venki Iyer, when he
And
was
Venki
thrown in
Iyer
that
to a
mix.
certain extent, but he didn't really find his position in the batting order, did he?
yeah.
And then you have all this firepower that's sitting and waiting. Rinku and Russell are sitting back thinking, well, when is it my turn?
Well, there were two tables where KKR finished near the bottom. One was middle over batting. They were the slowest team in the middle overs by some distance. That too, they were the only team that scored less than 8 and over through the entire middle overs.
Wow.
They were actually decent in the power play and deaths. They were among the top 3 in the power play and death, but they just couldn't hit spin in the middle overs. Against spin, they're the second slowest after CSK. And I think what we missed last season was, again, Narayan and Salt, because they were batting a bit deeper into the innings, they were hitting spin. And then there was Shreyas, who I think everyone kind of underestimated how important he actually was to the side. And like we were surprised this season looking at stats for Venki Iyer versus spin, Rinku Singh versus spin. Okay, Rahane maybe you already knew he's not the best hitter of
Rahane's
spin.
problem was post-power play.
Post-power play. But suddenly you looked at 4 guys there who can't, seem to hit spin or don't have great strike rates against spin. And then only at the back end of the season, you bring in Russell to hit the spin, but it's too late by then.
Even when they brought in Rovman Powell or Moeen Ali, they did nothing creative, if I can call it that. I think Akash Chopra said on this couch before, declutter that middle order. You can never have Rahane, or you should never have Rahane and Raghuvanshi batting together as good as both players are. When you have those kind of resources, you could have even considered putting Venki Iyer a position higher, make him open if need be, and try and be a little creative with your keeper.
Yeah.
And none of that just seemed to happen, even though the season was just getting further and slipping further and further away. Does that come down to tactics and captaincy and coaching here more than the personnel that you had in that sheet?
Well, they started with Quinton de Kock, didn't they?
Yeah.
At the top. Fair play. A very successful IPL player for a long period of time, but his career has started to taper off since he's retired from the volume of cricket he was playing for South Africa, which happens to a lot of players. I think at that point, once they recognised that wasn't working, I think they needed to make a significant shift towards a local keeper, just to rejig the balance of their side and just be a little bit more creative, as you say, with maybe Venki Iyer at the top, or, because you need your big players to find form, and sometimes you need to help them find form. You can't just sort of sit back and wait for them to find form when, they've only got 10 balls today. Sometimes you need to create an opportunity for them to recapture that form.
Did they give de Kock a long enough rope just on that? 7 games is what he got. The second game, he got a 97 and was player of the match against Rajasthan. And then he got 1, 15, 23, 2. And that's when they said that's enough. And that 2 was in that Punjab game where they should have chased 115.
Yeah.
So could they have gone on with the Quinton de Kock any longer?
Well, it's quite damning, those numbers, single-finger numbers. And the thing is that what we don't know here, and a lot of the fans out there don't know, is that there's more to the numbers when it comes to selection. You look at the numbers, but you also look at how that player is, the body language they're giving you, how they're training, how they're responding to training. And if all those things aren't stacking up, you're backed into a corner and have to make a change with a big player.
Even using Andre Russell, the bowler, was so big for them. It always seemed like an afterthought if there was a game that was getting tricky.
Yeah, if there's nothing happening, then they call Andre Russell. And we all know he's always on the expensive side, but he picks up wicket for you. And sometimes it's very, very important to pick up wickets, because the only way you can stop the run flow by picking up wickets. So Andre Russell, and I remember till 8 or 10 games down the line, he faced some 30 plus balls. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you want somebody like Andre Russell to face at least 20 balls per inning, because he's somebody who can done the damage with the other team in those 20 balls.
Huge
we remember
impact.
he done that against Rajasthan. First 8-9 balls, he was just 2 runs, but he believes in his ability, and then he got 50 of some 23 balls. So that's what his capabilities are. So you have to use those players in a better way.
To come back to your point, Tom, about last-minute decisions, I remember even on retention deadline day, the day before, there was news that Russell is not going to be retained. And then finally on the day he is. But KKR didn't spend the whole purse on their retained players. They spent less than that. They gave Narayan and Russell a little bit less. How much does all that kind of indecision and confusion then affect the actual team morale when you put the team together as the IPL?
Yeah, I don't think it affects you a lot because those players aren't involved in that process. Only the ones you're referring to is in Narayan and Russell, but the ones you're recruiting in aren't really aware of all the moving parts behind the scene. But you know, they clearly got off to the wrong on the wrong foot at that particular point, and I think that just sort of escalated their spiral.
Can we say that they actually, with those 2 wins that you bring up, Piyush, Lucknow, they were miles ahead of the chase, even though it was a 238 chase, and Punjab, more importantly, that the team just couldn't recover from it. And after that, I think it also showed in their batting, where they went overly cautious. They did not want to lose wickets, and whether you sense those 2 games, they just couldn't lift themselves after that.
Well, it do happen to any team, but that's what the experienced team is all about. You know, these things can happen. There are so many games which, you know, you're not even in the context of the game and you end up winning that game. So sometimes you lose like that. So you have to forget that and move forward, but that didn't happen. And in one particular game, I remember Ajinkya, Raghuvanshi, they all were batting together. So you can't have those 2 players batting together at the end of some 14, 15 over mark. So you want somebody like Rinku Singh to come in, Andre Russell, and even Venkatesh Iyer, I feel, when you have showed so much of faith in him, and Dustin will let me know the numbers, he has always been very effective when he batted in top 3. Because he's somebody who really wants hard ball coming onto his bat. When he comes lower down the order, he struggles, and that's what we have seen this season.
Yeah, I think last season his power play strike rate was really high. It was 170 plus. So when he starts in the power play is when he usually does well.
I mean, even when they lost a player or 2, I think Ramandeep, then they got in Manish Pandey. You could have easily just used that as a chance to lift everyone one position up. 100%. Nothing happened.
Yeah, if anything, you're just escalating your problem because you're getting another player that's a good player, but one that's not going to really impact or move the needle.
Okay, I think we'll have one more chat on KKR on their last day of the league, perhaps, on whether this is a one-season issue and it can be rectified going forward, or whether it needs some major overhauls and reconsiderations. But maybe just before, I'll tease that up by asking you one question, whether Venki Iyer is likely to go back into the auction next year, perhaps being brought back at a lower price. But then in small auctions, you know what they're all about. Tom knows what happens at small auctions. It's a bloodbath sometimes.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to pay what he's been paid this year, put it that way.
Okay.
So whether they do that and manage the negative side of that with the player is the brave thing to do.
I mean, I'm sure they're thinking about those decisions. I'm sure someone in that management is thinking, right.
Well, you could save 10 crore, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And then that 10 crore you can use to get another couple of players which can really help the cause for the team.
Try and replace the shoes of Phil Salt if you can.
I was coming to that point because you can have used those funds to get Phil Salt back, who has been really successful for you. So I think they can think on that note as well, that he is going back to the auction and then buying him at a lesser price, because as coach mentioned that team won't be willing to pay that much price.
Okay, well, I mean, Dustin and me would happily take half that money.
Half? I'd be happy with half of half.
Is the problem only to one opener, or is the Narayan as opener? Some questions coming on that too. Narayan the opener, is that still something that can be a plan for more than this season?
I mean, he came off towards the second half of the season. I guess the only issue was that then you're not some of the other guys would have liked to have opened. You had Rahane, Venki Iyer. So you weren't getting the best out of everybody else. But I mean, with Narayan, he still at the end of the day had a pretty good season. Maybe not like last year, but it's not a bad season for him by any stretch.
Okay, well, there are some questions on Gurbaz and on Rick Nock. Yeah, there's no end to it for KKR. Unfortunately, it's just been disappointing season. That we're still asking those questions is a story of itself, and why KKR, the defending champions, unfortunately, are out of the running. A quick word on RCB before we just wrap things up. It's a point. Is it a good point to have, like Piyush mentioned? And when you've got 16, then suddenly a point doesn't feel so bad. 17 is okay?
Yeah, 17 is okay, because you never know in that game, and sometimes that 1 point, then you're not worried about your run rate. Because you know, if you win the game and you're at same number of win with some team and you tie on that, so you have that 1 point of extra.
And they still have 2 games.
I think this is a classic game where once the game was looking like it was going to be a very short game or a no game, you prefer a no game than a short game because you'd hate to lose a game you feel you would win if it was a 20-over match.
Right.
And there's a fair chance of 19 being enough for top 2. Might not be, but even with one more win, they could finish in the top 2.
And you were making the point earlier that actually if we had a 5-6 over shootout, the point Tom makes, it suddenly makes KKR a bigger threat.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
With their line
Well, you never know. You might get Russell facing a couple more balls.
Yeah. Takes away the whole middle phase, which has been their struggle. Right, but I'm sure RCB, especially the fans at the Chinnaswamy, I feel for them that they came up in big numbers, bought the white Virat Kohli 18 jerseys, and unfortunately, those have only been soaked wet in the rain in Bengaluru. As it turns out, there's one more home game for RCB coming up. So I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. They have been happier being away from home, right?
Yeah.
And they're now
they won
looking-
their last 2 home games.
Yeah, they won
recovered
2.
a bit. Yeah.
2 out of 5.
They did close games as they were, Rajasthan and Chennai both. That could have gone either way. But yes, that's where we stand with RCB. Are we still confident that RCB have enough? They have SRH at home at Bangalore with the weather around, and Lucknow away in the last day of the league stage. They'll also know what the rest of the league looks like by then. They will make the top 2, if no, the top 4 at least, if not the top 2.
SRH at home is going to be a tough one because SRH is batting there, and with RCB with no Hazelwood, I think they might feast.
They might have a few bowlers to target, yes.
Well, but the wicket has been a bit tricky at that stadium in Chinnaswamy, and knowing the batting of SRH, they're used to of more on a flat surface.
Yeah.
So when the ball start doing something, because they bat in one fashion, and when the ball is doing something off the wicket, they struggle, and that's what happened with them in this season.
Come on,
Yeah,
Dustin.
also with 17 points, I mean, the worst that can happen to RCB, even if they lose their last 2 games, is there could be a tie on 17, and they've got a good net run rate. So I think for top 4, it's unlikely
Depends how
they'll
badly
fall
they lose, though.
Yeah, but I feel like top 4 at least is secure.
Yeah,
top
yeah.
2,
Yeah.
top 2, they're going to
Top
need
2,
to
they
win
got
at least
some
one.
work to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
I just don't see how they'll not beat Lucknow if all things go according to plan. But then this almost feels like a different tournament suddenly. Little 2-week thing.
Something
After
called
winning
Nicholas
some-
Pooran that might be in the the point of difference
And he is
there.
very much available. All right. On that note, say thank you very much. That's all the time we can spend on a washout. But we look forward to a long day and hopefully lots and lots of cricket. Tom Moody, Piyush Chawla will be back, as will Dustin, as we will see what happens in Jaipur. Stakes are high for the Punjab Kings, not so much for the Rajasthan Royals, but we'll get to see Vaibhav Suryavanshi again, so that'll be fun. In the evening game, that's high stakes. DC, GT, both very much have a lot to look forward to and play for. Join us for Build Up just before the toss on Sunday afternoon on Nexa Presents ESPN Cricket for Timeout. See you tomorrow.
Ready for it.
Thrilled for it.
Presenting France with Turbo Booster Jet Engine.
Nexa.